Hello and welcome to the Alpha Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I am pleased to be joined today by Dion McCormick, our expert here at Alpha Anywhere, who is going to give you a demo at the beginning of the presentation, as we do every week. But we're also here to answer your questions, and you could type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. You can also send them to guides, GUIDES, at alphasoftware.com. So let's get started. Hello, Dion. How's it going?
Doing great, doing great. So good to hear your voice. It's been a little while.
Excellent.
So
Well,
we'll
you mean
show
you don't
my
attend every
screen.
week? Come on, Dion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, and I'm missing Sarah. I'm
I
flying without
know
a
Sarah's not
without a
joining us
net
today. She's
here.
taking the afternoon off. Apparently, we allowed her to do that. I don't know how.
She's
But
breaking up the team. She's the flying
exactly.
Melindas. And that's going to be a and I'm going to screw it up. So there'll be this tragedy of me landing on the concrete. Like, wait, where's my Sarah net? What happened here? Well, thank you,
Exactly.
everybody. Yeah, no, and she does an amazing job. But I wanted to say thank you for everybody for taking the time to join us today. We have a real fun, cool subject. It's a new feature, and it really is, I like to call it's part of the just enhancement to make life easier for developers. It's not groundbreaking, but at the same time, it's something I really find which is really, really good. And I can't wait to show you a little demonstration of it and how it works and those pieces there. But before we get started, obviously, we're here to help you. So please take the time to go to your GoToWebinar control panel. You can go to the questions area and enter your questions about the topic we're talking about today. Or if you have any other topics that you want to go through, please put them in there. We'll do our best and we'll see what kind of damage we can do with those kind of questions there. Also, as always, please feel free to text us, or not text us, but send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com. We monitor that. It's a really good tool for us to find out what's interesting to the community and for us to put together content on there. So that's, again, guides@alphasoftware.com. So before that, also just real quick, go all the way over here. Man, it's crazy. We're almost into summer. I don't know about you, Dave, but I've got 5 days yet, and then the midgets are out of school, and so I'm going to be in. Both my girls are finishing up next week, and so it's like, summer's here. Got stuff to do
Nice.
there.
Yeah, we
So
got a
it's
couple of weeks up here in the Northeast because it stays a little bit cooler. It's probably pretty hot down there in Texas. Finally.
yeah, it's starting to turn. We're starting to hit those 100 days. It's not crazy. We're still getting breezes. It's not that August where the broiler turns on and doesn't turn off.
Yeah.
So and it's low humidity. So, but what the reason for that is that we're coming up with the DevCon is a little later this year, just a few more months. And the team is furiously putting together content and aspects. So we really want everybody to join us. It's a really great event. There's so much stuff that comes out of it. It's coming up in October. You can register at really nice registration rates right now. So make sure to get on and get those tickets. And again, all this will be recorded and in high quality. So not only will you be able to use it during the event, but if you miss something, you'll be able to use it there. And also it becomes essentially a reference library for you to go back and watch specific things as you migrate through your, maybe you're not using that kind of capabilities. Well, you will eventually with the Alpha platform. So we'll put it from there. So go check that out. Awesome event. And you just have to go to alphasoftware.com, DevCon 2022. Put that in the chat here. And there's a register button right there. And off to the races you go. So today, we are going to talk about a new feature in the new release. And just a real quick caveat, you'll have to use the developer nighttime release. I actually found a couple things. They've enhanced it and improved it. So you definitely want to use the latest. It's not in the production release yet, but this will give you a heads up and be able to prepare for that. So we're going to call it UX Watch Events. Well, I'm not going to call it that. That's what it's called. And it's a new way for you to add interactivity to your system in a much easier way. You could always do what I'm going to show you now. And in fact, I'll show you the traditional way to do it and the new way to do it. But what's important about this is the fact that now you'll be able to do it in a much easier way to manage and maintain over time. And, I don't know what the stat is. I forget what the stat, but it's like 20 or 30% of the cost of a software product or initiative goes into the initial development. 70 or enormous amount of money goes into the maintenance of it. So any way you can develop your implementation in a way that is easy to maintain, you will find long-term cost savings and more flexibility in your system. So this is an ideal example of that, where the alpha development team looked at it and said, we're doing these kind of applications, but it's kind of hard to keep maintaining it this way. Maybe there's a better way to do it. And voila, they came up with this methodology, which I'll demonstrate today. This little icon, I don't know if you guys are comic book fans, but it's called the Watcher. Actually, I don't know if you ever saw one of the Marvel movies. They had to get Stan Lee into it because he was always making a cameo of it, but the whole thing took out in space. So how do you do that? So they had a little very short snippet where he was there telling a story to the Watchers, and there are these people who watch the galaxy and monitor it, and I don't even really know the backstory other than they're funky looking and they watch everything. But it's the concept of being able to have a way to monitor everything going on in your user interface and be able to react to it properly. So really cool. And Stan Lee, may you rest in peace, brilliant guy, brought us a lot of really, really cool stuff. So we're going to talk about watch events and the ability to add dynamic behaviors to your, and I should have put it right here, UX controls. It's real time. It uses client-side JavaScript, but what very important is you can leverage server-side events. You can leverage Action JavaScript. I'll show you all that today. It's extremely easy to implement, and it has a dramatic improvement in maintainability. That's what the watch events are going to really provide you in this scenario here. So I'm going to do a quick demo. And again, if you have questions, please jump on to the GoToWebinar chat window there, go to the questions area, ask those away. And if you're also interested in getting a copy of these, please send us an email at guides@alphasoftware.com, and we will take care of getting that out to you so you'll have what we demonstrated in. And again, very important, and let me jump over here. I am using the Developer Edition Nightly build, just because if you use the latest production version, there's a glitch that's going to slow you down. So make sure you're using that. What is nice now is I'm using the Alpha Anywhere Universal Installer. It's been around for some time, but I can actually run both my Developer Edition and my stable build all on the same machine, and it takes care of making sure everything's up to date in the right location. So what I did is I went into I downloaded the Developer Edition. In fact, I need an update, but I'm just going to leave it alone for today because the classic case, don't want anything wrong to go on. But what I can do is once I have my installer, if I want to make sure I'm going to use this, I click the launch button, and that will launch the proper version of the Alpha development environment on my local machine versus somewhere else there. So I've already loaded up there. So I have two UXs here that I built. One is called the traditional event UX, and the other is called the watch event, because I want to kind of show you how you would do these things now, kind of a quick sample of how you would do it now, and the new methodology and some cool things you can do with it from there. So let's first start by going into the traditional event UX. So I have a very simple UX control. We got a panel card, and I have two things, a text box and a checkbox. So let's go ahead and go into working preview, and all these features works there. And go back here, and I can go into my text box, and if I change it, it triggers an event. And in this case, it does just a text box change. Let me go back in and actually modify this to say it is numeric, and it's got a logical field. Same thing with the checkbox, is that I've set it up so I am monitoring. If I click on it, it triggers an event. And that's a classic situation. Now, obviously, built into Alpha is a whole bunch of pre-built functionality around things like validation and stuff. But there may be situations where you want to watch a particular control, and if something happens on there or a specific value, it triggers something go. So you can kind of take that next level up where you're just not validating it, but based upon some interaction with a control, some value of the control, things pop up. So for instance, a great example would be with this checkbox is that if I want to say if it's checked, then I want to show some other fields that I want to collect that data. Or if it's unchecked, I don't want to show those things there. So that way you can provide very dynamic behaviors to your forms and your UX controls and do very fancy things that provide you the ability to do, make life easier and more positive and more interesting for your users. And importantly, declutter your user interface. Like for instance, if you don't want a bunch of fields to be shown unless there's this particular situation, often you'll set up an event where when something happens, it shows that from there. And what you want to do is only have that happen when you click on here. Now, the traditional one method to do it is like just basically putting on your, like putting things in a container and then watching the value of that control. That works great. But if you need to do more sophisticated things, not just to show or hide, like you need to show something, then pull some data and do some steps, this is what this more applies to from there. So let's go in here. I want to go ahead and show you. So here I have two controls here. I'm going to go to text box. And the traditional way you set up what's called a watch event is you go down to the JavaScript area here, and there is a on change event. So when the data changes in this control, and that applies to all the controls, then what it's going to do is it's going to trigger this on change event. So behind the scenes, Alpha is watching that control and it's saying, oh, if they make a change and there's an on change event, then I'm going to trigger it and then let the person do what they want to do. So if you look, if I double click on that, then all I really have is a very simple alert. But I could trigger action JavaScript, I could do other kind of things from there, but this is just a very simplistic example. If I go back into checkbox, I now have an on change event, and there's my on change event where when the value of this changes, it triggers, in this case, just a very simple message. Now, again, this works perfect. It's reliable, it's powerful, it's great. But let's say you have a UX which has 100, 400 controls on it. I mean, it's not inconceivable. I have some very, very large, complex UXs doing a lot of different things. And if I need to change something, I have to go in and say, okay, first thing I need to do is say, oh, I remember I have an on change event on that checkbox. So I'm going to find it. And by the way, I don't know if you've used this feature, but as your UXs get more complicated, I do this all the time. You have a button here called Find. When you click on it, it basically gives you a view of what it is. And then I can just start typing whatever the text is that I've got associated with that control, and it tells me which one it is. And then I can just click Go Control, and it selects it. So let's say I'm on this control, and I go here. I go, oh, I want to go to the checkbox, and I double click on it, or go to Control here. Boom, it takes me right there, and I can edit it. But this can get complicated. You could have a bunch of different interactions and pieces here. So up to now, you had to kind of manage that in the on change event here. There were some other more sophisticated methods. You could use some JavaScript client side events, but it just got a little, just wasn't conducive to doing it. So I kept it in that way where I would just go find the on change event. I'd put my interactions there. I tried to minimize the amount of code here. And that's one thing I want to really recommend to everybody is don't write a whole bunch of complex code right here. If you're going to do something like that, and this is more of a strategy, go to your functions here and say like function, my cool function, and then put your JavaScript that you're going to run right here. Or more importantly, go to your JavaScript actions and put it there. I'm just very adverse to putting the actual JavaScript that I'm going to run, even though I did here, which is bad, but it was a single thing, because I'd rather just call that function here. So that way, when I have to manage that function, I don't have to go find the on change event. I can just go right here and it's all in one spot. So that's first step is, don't try to put a whole bunch of, and this will apply on the new method too. Don't try to embed a whole bunch of JavaScript within a specific controller location. Try and put it in either as a JavaScript action or in a function in here, and then make your calls to it something very simple, where this may just be show, my cool control, boom, and then therefore it's real simple, it's easy to maintain and do things from there. I'm not going to actually save that from there. So the new feature is really cool. Let me go ahead and show you. This is a little more complex of interaction, but I have a watch event UX. So this is a different UX. Similar in here, I've got a panel layout with some panel cards. And then I have a couple series of button, things here. I've got a text box and a switch. Now, if you'll notice, if I go to text box and I scroll down, I do not have an on change event, but this will change. Here's another one, switch. And I'm going to go here down to, on this one, there are other, but you'll notice on this, there's not really even an on change event. I think there's a on select event you can trigger, which is similar on change, but you'd have to figure out from there where it goes there. But I do want things to happen when this works. So let's go ahead and save this. Let's do a working preview here. And you'll see here are my controls on the left, and then there's my view box right here. So let's say I do my switch. Oh, check that out. It actually triggered an event. Triggered event. Now, as I mentioned before, wait a minute, there's no on select event. There's no on change event. So where did I put that sort of watch event? And that's where this goes into, is now I can go to properties up here in the left corner. I can kind of go up and down, but I can just click on this little button right here to find a property. And I'm going to call watch events. And now I have a new thing here called watch events. Let's move that up in the middle. And this is where I can centralize the watching of controls and trigger things to happen. So how it works is you double click on it. Okay, so now I have this new panel here. So on the left, I have watch events, and you can create more than one watch event. In the right-hand side, it says this event controls to watch, and then you can select control here, and then here is the JavaScript. So think of it as kind of on change, but there's another couple of levels of indirection that helps it, but this is the actual JavaScript. Now, again, I would most likely put this into a function and put my function right here, and you'll see kind of how I do that with JavaScript actions, but that way then whenever I need to change the behavior that, once I've set up the watch event, that's all I want this to do, is to watch that control and trigger something for me. I want to actually manage what that actual event is and what the behaviors are in a much easier way, which is here at the events, either actions or functions. But I embedded it here for right now. So let's go ahead and, I'm going to go ahead and delete this one here. And let me show you how I would do that. So I would go here, and let's go ahead and do this the right way. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go function, my cool function. And I'm going to just go alert, hello. Okay, and then I'm going to close it out. So I've just created this little JavaScript function right there. And again, I can have alpha. I can actually have alpha write that, and I can create JavaScript right here. I also have all the methods here. So if I want to do something a little fancier, here's all the potential JavaScript I can run, things like list updates and list things, etc. from there. But all I did here was create this little function here called my cool function, because again, I want to centralize it there. So I'm going to go back to my properties. I'm going to go in here. Okay. So what I want to happen is when someone hits that select box, or the switch box, excuse me, I want it to trigger my function. Similar to what I said, I want it to show some screens or updates or do an API call or do something crazy there. So I click add watch event, and I'll just call this one switch. Has to be unique. And now it's asking me, great, okay, that's the name of the watch event. What fields do I want to watch? So I click here, and you'll notice that it's going to show me here are all of my different fields. And let's say I want switch, that switch there, and I click OK. Now this is really, really, really cool. You don't have to limit yourself to a single watch. So if I want to trigger this event, but I'm watching 3 or 4 controls, boom, I can just tell it which ones I want. And when either of these fields change, it's going to trigger this watch event. In my case, I only want it to on the switch box because I don't want to screw my other stuff up, but that's really cool. Remember contrast, where I'd have to go in and I'd have to put in that function on every single on change, etc. And remember where all that's at. This makes it much simpler. I have a single place I can go. I can say, here are my events, and here's what it's going to watch. So I now have this switch. It's watching the switch 1, and here is the JavaScript I want you to execute. And in this case, I will just put in, I want to call my function. Again, you're welcome to write JavaScript in here. There's no problem with it. But as you can see, it's really not meant as an editor. I don't have all those other nice little lookups and things like this. This is meant to be just really simplistic JavaScript that gets triggered. The more detailed stuff either happens in a JavaScript action or a JavaScript function. So now that I've got that, I save that. So let's go ahead and go in here. And I'm going to click there, and voila, it triggered, it captured that and did the action from there. So let's take an example. Let's say next week you add another switch control. going to add a new switch control in here. We'll call it switch 2. And you go, whenever that, I want it to have the same thing happen. All I have to do is go to properties, watch events. Here's my switch thing. I click that. It shows me which control is currently using it. I can now click switch 2. Now it's monitoring both of those controls. And save often. Now, it triggered it properly. And it triggers on each of those. Now in here, you can obviously, add your JavaScript to monitor like, if it's going from on to off, or like if it's going from off to on, only do that message or on there. So you've got all the ability to, to trigger and then look at the state of your UX to actually take behaviors and things like that. So let's do something a little more interesting. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to type the words blonde pea and I'm going to change it. Let's see. Oh, wait. There we go. Or you'll notice as I put in some text right here, it's updating my view box over here. Now, this is semi-artificial. There's better ways to trigger updates of view boxes, but I wanted to show you a little more sophisticated behavior where if they put in a specific value here and they change it, then maybe I want to update and present some new statistics, like refresh a view box, and that view box then will show like some graphs or charts or whatever it happens to be. So this is where you can create some really cool things where now when this changes, I can trigger some updates to my screen to create a very dynamic, very powerful environment for the users, but I don't have to write a ton of code to do it. So let's look and see how that works. So first and foremost, I have over here a view box. It is just connected to my database, and I have a filter where it's basically going to filter on an argument, and that argument comes from that text box. So basically I say, when I refresh this view box, what it does is it will grab whatever the current value is in text box and pass it into my filter function. So that's how it works there. So now what I did is I went to my JavaScript Actions. I created an action called viewbox refresh. And again, this is important. This is kind of where you want to do your stuff because this is point and click. Otherwise, I have to write JavaScript. I want to minimize doing that. So I'll go into viewbox refresh. I added an action in here called viewbox control actions, where basically I say refresh the data in viewbox 1 and keep the selection. And I can say animate it too. Pretty fun there. So now what I've done is I've used the power of action JavaScript to create my sophisticated thing that's going to happen. And what I want to do now is I want to tie the change of this text box to this behavior. Now, before what I would do is go in and I would add an on change event and insert it there. Works fine, but we're going to do something a little more interesting. Now, remember what I said is that when you're in creating your actual action in the watch event, you just want to minimize it. You just want to run a little piece of JavaScript. You don't want to write a bunch of JavaScript in there. So what's cool about Action JavaScript is that you'll notice here's the name of it. There's a little button here called click to see the JavaScript code to invoke this action. When I click that, it shows me if you run this little JavaScript, this is going to happen. So I'm going to copy that to the clipboard and I'm going to click OK. So now I've created my behavior, and what I want to do is attach that behavior to text box 1. So let me go back in here and I'll start over. I'll just remove that one. So I want to add that. So I'm going to call it text box. That's the name of the watch event name. I want it to watch text box 1. And then here I'm going to just go ahead and paste in that little piece of JavaScript. So I'm not actually writing anything. I'm just copying and pasting. So now what's going to happen is if this value, it will start watching this text box. If that text box 1 changes, it's going to trigger this. So let's make sure I didn't screw it up. Go into working preview. And voila, it's working. Minimize, very little low code. I mean, basically in this case, I didn't write any code at all. I basically used Action JavaScript and then copied that little piece of JavaScript to trigger. And now if I need to change the behavior of what happens, I can just go in here to JavaScript Action And I can say, oh, okay, that's great, but let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to add a message box. Actually, this one. I'm going to add a new action here. Transient. Refresh, done. And I'll do that up at the top. There we go. And then notice I'm not going in and hunting down any controls. I'm not updating any JavaScript. I'm basically now just going to go into working preview. We'll do it again. Oh, I didn't spell it right, but the behavior worked there. So you can see I got now two things happening. One is a refresh here, but gave me a little message that then disappears. That's called a transient message. I use them a lot. They're great ways to, because it doesn't stop the user from continuing to do work. And I usually make it show a little less, maybe 3 seconds versus 5 seconds, but you can kind of pick and choose from there. So the benefit now is twofold. One, I don't have a bunch of JavaScript buried on my my different controls. And I don't have to worry about the difference between how to trigger a change event on a checkbox versus a switch. Because in this case, one has one method, which is the on change event. The other one has another one, which is the on select event. Now I don't have to worry about that. Basically, I just go to my, I create either my JavaScript function or JavaScript action. Prefer JavaScript action because they'll have less code to maintain, which is cheaper in the long run. I go to server, I go to properties, go into watch events. I set up one or more watch events. I tell it which controls to watch for each watch event. And then I put that little piece of JavaScript or action JavaScript running here, and it takes care of it there. So now when I add new controls and I want to trigger the same thing, like let's say, here's an example here is let's say, I'm going to actually show you a really kind of cool example. Let's go ahead and add in a new control here, and I'll create a new text box. Okay. And let's call that text box 2. Pretty sophisticated. Now, when either of these happens, I want to run this view box here and refresh it. Well, again, traditionally, what I'd have to do is go here, find the on change, now go there. In my case here, I can go to my watch events, go to my text box, and in this case, I'm going to say watch both text box 1 and there. Click there, and now I'll go alpha key just to get some data up there. So you'll notice that, and then if I change this test and change it, you're going to see it triggers the same event. It's still looking here for the actual data value, but that's where if you had 3 or 4 fields and you wanted to make sure if any of those changed, you updated either a grid, or I'm sorry, a list box or a view, I'm sorry, a view box or a list or a chart. This is a super simple way to do it. And now going forward, all I have to worry about is here are my events over here. And then here is where I tie those events to my controls, and I'm done. I don't have to go dig things out. And I know I'm kind of getting a little repetitive, but trust me, you come back and look at this app 2 months from now, you'll be going, where did I bury that? What events did I change that to? And it just really promotes maintainability, and it's going to make your life easier. And for the other person who may be taking over your code, if you standardize on this, then their life is easier too, because you have a design pattern of saying, I don't bury things in my controls, I create them, I then attach watch events, and then I can manage what gets from where. And it's really sophisticated. I mean, I've barely scratched the surface on this, but you can do some amazing things with that. So as I mentioned, it allows you to add dynamic behaviors using JavaScript, either that or action JavaScript. It's real time, meaning that you notice the moment I changed any of those controls, it triggered it because it happens on the client side. Now, you can call back and implement server-side behaviors, but all of the monitoring is done on your client, so you don't have to submit the form or do anything like that. You can leverage those server-side events. They're easy to implement. It allows you to kind of structure your code and your implementation for maintainability. And that's really where you're going to gain the big benefit, is that maintainability. You know, especially as your UXs grow. I mean, now those were very simplistic UXs, but trust me, you will end up with UXs with a lot of controls on them, doing a lot of different things, and this will really save you a lot of time and effort. And where did I put that kind of questions there? So Dave, I'd like to go ahead and open it up for any questions about watch events. and see if there's anything, or we can talk about that, and also to open it up for other questions that people may have.
Excellent. We do have some watch events questions, so let's just
Yeah.
dive right in, and then we've got a couple other questions as well.
Awesome.
And
People are
also,
awake
and
today.
also, just to confirm, you said that someone was asking what version you were using of Alpha Anywhere, and I
Oh,
think it was the nightly
good
release
point.
from March. I'm sorry, from May 5th or 6th.
Yeah, let's
Let's
go
just
over
confirm
here.
that version.
It
May 6th.
was May 6th, yeah.
Right.
And that was the one, the issue I ran into got fixed in that one. So I'm sure it's in the more recent nightly builds. I just haven't updated didn't have a reason. And this will be rolled into the next production. That's why I want to make sure you understood. If you tried to do this with your current production, you may see some strange results. So definitely put this on your roadmap for the next production release. And if
And
you want
next
to play with
production
it,
release is due out in about a week or two, so it's imminent
dun,
there.
dun, dun, my timing is pretty good.
It's very
I
good.
planned that. Yeah, I planned. I'm
Okay.
the watcher. I know when things are going to happen. Events, huh?
There we go.
Indeed.
Okay.
Okay. Fire away.
All right. So for a
I look a little
change
better,
event.
hopefully, than the watcher. I don't know. Don't say
Well,
anything.
he
Don't
doesn't
say
wear the
anything.
vest. You got to wear the vest. You know, that's the.
That is true.
Yeah. Okay. So, question about the change events. So, is that does that happen just when the field loses focus, or does the value actually have to change in the change event for it to fire?
In the change, it is when the value changes. So especially like on drop-down boxes,
Hmm.
that will it will only trigger. And that's a good question. I'm not sure if watch events use the same thing or fire every time something there. But the change events is like if you change the value. In fact, we could try it right here. Let's give this a try,
Hmm.
just for giggles. So I'm going to go ahead and put in blonde P. Okay. Now let's put in blonde P. Yep, it is. And watch events are the same thing. It only detects when the value changes.
Great.
So
So
this
simply
is,
losing focus isn't enough to do it, but but if you were
yeah.
to lose focus, blur, I guess is
If
the
you want
technical
it to
term.
fire every time, then you're going to want to use what's called the on blur event, which is when a control loses focus, that will have it. And some elements do not have this event. But text boxes and drop down boxes and things like that, I think have it. So this is mainly if the value doesn't change, then this doesn't fire or the watch events don't. They're really looking for differences between the initial state and then the next state.
Fantastic. So then the next question was, and you kind of answered this, but can a watch event in a field be triggered on a specific value, not just when it changes? So if a particular value is entered to the field only, then is it triggered?
Yep. So what I'll do is let me just show you how I would do that. Now, as you notice, I put this into a view box there. So that's where you may, this is how I would approach it. I'm going to go ahead and first I'm going to go here and I'm going to go text watch. So I'm creating a JavaScript function because I'm going to have to add a little JavaScript in there. And then what I'm going to say is I'm going to say text1 is equal to dialog.object.get value. And I want to go ahead and get the value of text box 1. Okay. Then what I do is I say if text 1 equals, now remember we're in JavaScript world,
land.
so it looks a little differently than XBasic, but I say alf key, then in this case, I want it to trigger this. So I'm saying if only the value of text box 1 is alf key, then run this. So
Excellent.
now I go in here, I copy that, I go to my watch event. Now, instead of immediately triggering that, I can now change that. So I'll run that little function, and in there I do the checking. So let's see if this works. So I'm going to go ahead and, with a bad case, I'm going to put blonde P. As you can see, nothing happened. So now let's look at alf key. Oh, nothing happened. I probably my JavaScript, dude.
Mm-hmm. But it does, the watch event is going to fire every time regardless, but you can track to see whether or not the condition has been met before you go
Yep,
on with your stuff is the
exactly.
idea. Uh-huh.
So yeah, that's it. Text equals alf key. That all looks right. And then
We need the
my,
function keyword, is someone's suggestion. Let's see if
oh,
they're right.
yeah.
There we
See, I
go.
really don't do a lot of JavaScript. I try to avoid it like plague, mainly because it's so touchy about all that stuff.
Yeah.
But you're right. So that's a classic reason why I try to do everything through Action JavaScript. And you can put some in there, but these kind of things from here. So yeah, so let's go ahead and do that. Good call. Good call. Good call. And it might be good if I actually alf key. There we go.
There we go.
So that's the way you do it. Yeah. So you can do it, but you're going to have to do a little bit of checking there. One object, one way to do it is maybe just do an XBasic callback and handle it in XBasic if you're more comfortable there, and then send back this as the result if you want to refresh. But the downside of that, this all happens on the client, so it's instantaneous versus there. Now, do you realize when I am refreshing this view box, the view box itself is making a call back to the database and pulling that data. So different things there. But great question. That's how it approaches. You can, at the time the watch event occurs, you can look at the state, grab any controls, get that data, and then use, in this case, JavaScript to do something from there.
Cool. All right, now a more specific question again about that on change or that watch event. Does it change with each keystroke, or do you have to leave the field before it?
You have to leave the
fires?
field.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not
And
each
again, if you want to
keystroke,
get that more sophisticated, then you use
on
the
click, right?
on key up.
Up. Oh, on key up. Okay.
Yep. Every time the key goes up, like a new character is entered in there, it will fire. And that's really handy for, like, if you want to do fancy kind of text manipulations. I've used that before. Or you want to use like key combos. You could actually force the focus to that box, and when they hit a key, you could trigger a behavior based on that key. And so it's kind of cool if you want to have like keyboard oriented navigation and stuff.
Excellent. Next one is if you have multiple let me see. I had a couple questions here about multiple controls. Can you create multiple watch events for the same control?
Yes, you can. So basically, you just go into properties, and then you go add watch, and I'll go that text box 2, and I can watch the same controls. Now, obviously, you would probably, this is kind of redundant, but maybe in this case, you only want this event to trigger when text box 1 changes, or whatever it happens to be actually too. But you don't want it, so anytime these two are touched, you want this to happen. But if this one, only this one, ignore the other. So you can mix and match like that. It does probably, you only have to be a little careful, is that if you get too crazy, you're like, well, why'd that happen? And then you have to kind of make sure you're not triggering it accidentally. So, but you can absolutely do that. There's no reason not. There's no law. Just
the next question
heavy guidance
is, so let's go the other way. Let's say you've got multiple controls. All of them have got watch events, but they all call the same function. Is there a way to tell the function from where
which control it came from?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way I would probably do that is in here. That's a really good question. I would have to investigate that.
Finally,
I was trying to think about
it. Took all day to stump you, but we got it.
I know. No, that's a really good question, because it may be, that's a really good, because you definitely want to say, oh, maybe in this, it would simplify things there.
If you need to do that, send that in the guides. We'd be happy to look at it if we can't.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because I don't see any guidance here of saying, like, if it gives you because what you would probably do is that if it gave you like e.control or something like that, some of the other functions, they'll say, oh, this data is present when you call it, so you can pass it into that, and then from there use it. But I don't see any notes on here which watch control. That's a cool feature request. And by the way, once this is public, you can always go to help, send an enhancement request here, and ask that. and that's pretty cool. Those are the kind of things we'd love to hear from the community, because it really shows, oh yeah, there are pretty interesting use cases that you can use to find out which specific control will ask for that information.
Very cool. Here's another 2 questions, which I think I can handle each of them. So let's see. The first one is this feature available in the Community Edition? And the answer is yes. Every feature
Yes.
that you see is almost always available in the Community Edition, unless it uses DBF files or requires you to publish someplace other than Alpha Cloud. So everything you see here and pretty much all of our presentations will apply to the Community Edition as well. The second question, which someone asked, and I had run into this problem myself recently, is let's say you've got a web app and you're putting a link up on the screen to a JPEG or a text file. And what you want to have happen when they click on that link is for that file to be downloaded. They don't want it to open up in the browser as it typically would. It turns out that there is a way to do that, and I have placed the code for that in the chat window. It's a little bit of HTML. And basically, there's a parameter that you can put in your ahref tag called download. And that download, and by putting in download, it tells the browser, no, I want to download this instead of opening it in the browser. This works on all browsers, apparently, except for Internet Explorer, but it works on Edge, for example. And the other thing is that it will not work with Chrome if it's a cross-origin request. In other words, if the HTML page, which has got the link on it, has got a different domain, say, than where you're storing the asset. So let's say you put it on S3, then Chrome is going to consider that to be a security risk and not touch it. But if it's coming from the same server, the same URL, you should be all set. So that's
now
that's in the chat.
an alternative too is you could put a button on here, or you could put a link. So let's go ahead and add a link.
We've got an action for that, don't we?
Yep. And then when that happens, on the click of that event, you go file download.
Nice.
And do it all there. And then the neat thing about this is you have complete control over it. You can do other fancy stuff. So it presents as a link.
And it'll work on Internet Explorer if you've got someone still using the older browser.
Exactly. But then we're using the file download capability from here to be able to do that. So that's pretty handy. So you can go in here, and the type could be S3, could be absolute. I mean, there's so many flexible ways you can then decide how to actually find the file you want to download on that.
Wow,
so that would be an alternative. But I would try the first one, especially if your files are hosted on the same server. That's your quick and dirty way to do it.
Fantastic. And let's see, we got more questions here. We don't have a lot, which is good because I know you need to leave a little early today. So
yeah, I'm so sorry, everybody.
We'll be cutting it a little bit short today, but not too short. This one says, oh, here's one. I have a drop-down list in a list control, and the formatting doesn't really do what I want it to do. I play with it quite a bit, but the column data doesn't align or behave in the way it should. Are there any tricks to get that list to format better? It doesn't look like you have an HTML option to format it.
Okay, so in a list control, you have a column that's a drop down.
Mm-hmm.
And then I see, and then they're using that to kind of select
how do I
the value.
format that text inside that drop down?
Ooh, that's a good one. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure on that one.
Okay. Then
would I
send it in? We'll get you the answer to it.
Yeah, send that in, and we could actually try and do a little demo on how to control it. I know there's a lot of, there are tricks where you can apply CSS to specific elements there, and that's usually the trick, is to use CSS to try and get things lined up and do it, because then it obeys it really nicely. So good question.
So the person who wrote in before saying, look, they've been using that download action JavaScript for downloading from S3, but apparently it still opens in the browser. So why don't we take a look at that? Send that one in to us so that we can figure out how to get that for you.
Yeah.
That's a feature that everyone's going to want. So if we can't know how to do it, then that's bad. So please send that in.
Yeah, my downloads go directly in there.
That looks like it for the questions list for now. If anyone has got any other questions they would like to have answered, please send them into guides, guides @alphasoftware.com. Dan, thank you so much for presenting
Thank you.
today.
Great crew.
Great crew as always. Exactly. Thanks
Yep.
everyone for showing up. We hope to see you at our next Wednesday webinar. Until then, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.